Hey everybody, welcome to yet another World of Warships match, this time in the Clemson. This is the Tier 4 US destroyer, and this is probably one of the best brawling ships in the game. Once we get into the match, you'll see why. Now, the Clemson, along with several of the other low-tier US destroyers, has a very curious design feature. If we look at the layout of its torpedo tubes, instead of having them arranged along the center line of the ship like the wartime destroyers were, and like pretty much every Japanese destroyer, the Clemson actually has two sets of triple tubes on each side. What this does is make the Clemson absolutely fantastic in close range engagements. It's virtually impossible to beat. It also has much faster traversing guns than many of the Japanese destroyers, which makes it very, very flexible. It's capable of hunting and killing other destroyers easily, whereas the Japanese destroyers are much better suited to dealing with larger ships and avoiding destroyers. The Clemson's moderately fast. Its gunnery is okay, but the real gem here is the torpedo tubes and their layout specifically. Now, what this means is that if you happen to catch two oblivious pubby battleships driving along next to each other, which they often do, you can dart straight down between the two of them and drop a full spread out to either side and blow the shit out of both of them in a single pass. I've done it. It is absolutely magical. The other thing that this allows you to do is to fire off a full spread from one side, which is already 6 torpedoes. That's about equivalent to what the Japanese destroyers get from a full spread, and then snake around firing off the other side as well for a total of 12 torpedoes in the water simultaneously, which is absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of spread you put out in most of the tier 7 and 8 destroyers. So as you can see here, we've actually run into the enemy Clemson, and you'll notice I'm firing HE at him. Now the reason for this is, a lot of the destroyer guns, you don't really have the best damage. If you can put an AP shell through the Citadel, which is not very big on a destroyer, it's basically just the machinery room and a magazine, yeah, you'll probably one-shot them. But for the most part, you're actually safe at firing HE, trying to set them on fire and knock their guns out of action until they give you a straight shot down their bow or stern. The reason for that is, obviously, there's more destroyer in the path of your shells, and more stuff for the shells to fuse on. I managed to fire and forget some torpedoes over there, which takes out one of the enemy destroyers, the Clemson, and then I begin pounding shells into the Minakaze and finish him off with my guns. There's actually another destroyer running in through that smoke behind me somewhere, but for now he's not our problem. We'll worry about him later. You can see he's fired some torpedoes at us, but they're not likely to hit. I fire a couple shells in the general direction where I think he is, but again, I've got other things to worry about, namely this Myogi who's come flying around the corner without paying any attention to what's on the other side. I put out 6 torpedoes, which is spread from my right side. He's got a bunch of torpedoes chasing him as well. Obviously somebody else took a shot at him. And that's the end of him.
We've destroyed an enemy battleship.
Now, I could go back and deal with the destroyer behind me, but these aircraft carriers are such tempting targets. I'm sorry that the replay is jittering, by the way. There's nothing I can do about it. The replay feature's only just been implemented, so it's kind of early days. And on top of that, the actual game is kind of jittery as well at times, much like World of Tanks was when it first entered closed beta. I'm not sure if it's a netcode issue or what. You know, it's still playable, but sometimes shit's kind of rubber band back and forth a bit, and it's kind of goofy. Now, when it comes to carriers, ammunition selection depends on what you want to do. Carriers generally don't respond well to AP unless you know where their engine room is. As you can see, I'm hitting this guy in his engine room and his steering gear, and that's fucking him up. If I was aiming further forwards and hitting him along his bow, I'd be doing barely anything with AP because there's nothing there to actually get damaged. It's a carrier, it doesn't have a forward magazine because it doesn't have any main guns. Now, as well as doing damage, HE tends to set carrier decks on fire, and when a carrier's deck is on fire, he can't take off or land his aircraft. So quite often, it's a good idea when approaching a carrier to alternate between AP and HE, trying to stop him from getting aircraft up to defend himself, while also putting shots into his engine to damage him and slow him down. Again, you can see me firing off torps from both sides, allowing me to forget about the carrier for now while dealing with this destroyer, who I set on fire. There goes the carrier, and the destroyer is driving right into my torpedoes. And that's the end of him.
Enemy destroyer blown up.
I did take a bit of damage in that fight, but I managed to come out of it alive, which is more than I can say for the enemies. And already I am sitting at 5 kills and 10 torpedo hits. You've got to be happy with that. Minakaze manages to kill the enemy Kawachi, and now all that's left is an enemy cruiser who just went down and 2 Congos on the other side of the map. The Congo's a really good solid battleship. It's also quite fast, but against an angry pack of destroyers, well, not quite as strong. You can see that even though the enemy carriers have been sunk, their aircraft are still flying around. They will continue flying around until they run out of fuel and inevitably crash into the ocean. Or run out of weapons or something. Actually, I'm not sure if they modeled fuel, I can't remember. In case it's not obvious, I have never played aircraft carriers in this. I'm not even sure if the carrier driver retains control of his aircraft after he's sunk. I'll have to play carriers at some point and put up a video of it. I mean, I even play Ardian tanks now, but I get more enjoyment out of actually being in the ships rather than controlling little flights of planes around. So, while I'm heading over to deal with the Congos, I may as well talk a bit more about stuff. Destroyers get smoke. They have a limited number of smoke screens. You can see the little 2 in the top right corner of the icon. That means I have 2 uses left of my smoke screen. Now, most destroyers get spotted by ships at around 7 or 8 kilometers and by aircraft at around 4 kilometers. This is an important detail because a lot of destroyer drivers don't know it and will pop their smoke when they're 10 or 15 kilometers away from the enemy. They may not actually be visible to the enemy, but the presence of a smoke screen is a telltale sign that there's a destroyer lurking around. And the direction the smoke screen is moving in generally tells you where the destroyer is going. So it's important to actually make smart use of your smoke screen rather than just mashing it the second it's ready, because it also has an annoying habit of blocking teammates' line of sight. Smoking your own team does not win you any favors, and so you really have to be careful when you use it. And also, of course, you want to still have it ready if you have to make a quick getaway, if you bite off more than you can chew. Now I'm just putting HE shells into this Congo, trying to get a fire started. He's nearly dead anyway. The torpedo range on the Clemson is about 4.5 kilometers from memory. It's very, very short, so you have to really get up in people's faces to torp them. But as you can see from, well, this match, the Clemson has absolutely no problems at all doing that. I managed to set the Congo on fire. The aircraft carrier pilot, or driver, whatever, captain, manages to get off a spread of torps from his bombers, but unfortunately for him, the Congo turns parallel to them, and avoids taking damage. However, what this does is force him towards the island. He has to turn to his left to evade it, otherwise he'll beach himself and will be guaranteed dead. And he's also currently occupied firing at our Congo. Now I can see from the torpedo aiming track that he's actually turning now and so I can guess more or less where he's going to be as I round the corner of this island. Put one spread where the marker says, and then one just past it. His turn rate isn't real good, and then just to add insult to injury, I put in another 2 spreads. Again, leading slightly ahead of the turn indicator just in case he tries to turn into my torps. But not today.
Enemy heavily damaged.
Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and as ever, I'll see you on the next one.